Well, hi, everybody. I am just thrilled to have a special guest today. Um, Sarah McCrum is a noted author, and she is a teacher of how to deal with money and a lot of other issues. She's written a book called Love Money, Money Loves You, and I guess her newest book is called Energy on Demand. And so I want to welcome Sarah today. Sarah?
Thank you very much, Gary. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's get into this interview. I'm kind of interested in your background. Can you sort of give us an idea of where you grew up, or how you grew up, and how you got to where you are today? I guess what we're kind of interested in.
It feels like quite a long story. I grew up in the UK, and my father was in the Navy and came from a line of naval officers. And my mother was an artist, just like completely a born artist from a very, very early age. And and I grew up in a very kind of middle class English way. And that's probably important. I think it's been important in my whole story with money and the work that I do, because there's something about that British middle class where you're very buttoned up emotionally. There are such strong beliefs about how life is and what's right. And there's a kind of moral, it's like a moral superiority that goes with it that I can reflect on now looking back. But at the time, it just seems so natural to think the way that your parents think. And so, I went to boarding school, which is a very traditional and typical way that a girl of my background would have been educated. I went to Cambridge University because I was intelligent and I was very good in school. I came out of Cambridge University with no clue how to live whatsoever, no clue about really anything. I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that. So I think I was a born teacher, really. That was so natural for me. And the biggest thing that shifted my life, shifted the trajectory of my life, was when I was 30. Well, when I was about, I think I would have been about 28, my sister was diagnosed with a brain tumor just a couple of weeks after she'd got married. And we had this idyllic wedding on an island in the Mediterranean. And 2 weeks we were in a London hospital in the neurological ward. And I remember when I was first told about that, and that sense of things like that don't happen to families like ours, but it was happening. It was such a disconnect in my mind, like, how's this possible? And inevitably that made a huge change to my life. And in a way, I can say that I'm grateful to my sister for causing that change, because I'm not sure what it would have taken otherwise. That was a big shock in a way. And from there, I after a while, really to cope initially with my own emotional stuckness, I just didn't. 6 months after she died or so, all I really knew how to do was work and cry from time to time, but I just got stuck. I felt completely blocked, and I was introduced to an acupuncturist, and in 40 minutes, I became completely normal again. I went from feeling completely stuck to feeling happy and relaxed, just, like me, which was a revelation to me and eventually led me on the path. I was then introduced to a Qigong master in London, trained with him for 7 years, and got deeply embedded with this sense of the ancient Chinese culture and Chinese wisdom. Moved on to another Chinese master, trained with her for 15 years, changed my whole life, really, because of that. Became a teacher. And then there's still quite a lot that's happened since then, but that's a little bit of a snapshot of a story that I could never, ever have predicted where I've ended up from my childhood.
So during that time period when you were having that problem with you said your sister or sister-in-law?
My sister,
Your
my younger
sister.
sister, yeah.
What was your belief about death and dying and those type of things?
I hadn't had a lot of contact with it. Like one or two people in the community, younger people, had died, and I remember just noticing things. But that was the first time it came close to me. The thing
No.
that I actually remember most strongly was on the afternoon. She died in the morning, and we were there. In the afternoon, I started calling people, and I remember thinking, "Oh, my sister's all right, actually. She's okay. It's only us who."
Mhm.
This sounds really harsh, but in a way, I said it's us who feel sorry for ourselves because she's
No.
gone. And I had a very strong sense exactly in the poem. I actually read the poem in her funeral. I think it's an Elizabeth Kubler-Ross poem about you're just in the room next door or something like that. She lived on this Mediterranean island, and so she wasn't there most of the time. And it's like, oh, it's just the same as if she's there. The only thing is she's not going to come here, and I can't go and visit her there anymore. But I
Right.
really had that sense, and I had no preparation for that. It was just in me, I think, that that wasn't it was she was just somehow it was the same as if she was in another room. um, I think over the years I probably deepened my sense of what was going on, but that was a very striking sense that I had, and very surprising at the time.
Was the qigong and the other Chinese medicine and other things that you learned have any influence on that shift that you made?
um, I mean, they came later. They came as a
Oh,
consequence of her dying.
yeah,
So it's more that shock to my system, shock to my identity. I think that's what it was. I thought of myself as a certain person in a certain kind of family, and then this thing happens that I thought didn't happen to people like me. So
right.
it kind of shocked my identity, and that was actually what really led me to ask very, very different questions, and questions about life and what is health, how do we how can we live in a way, and probably wanting to prevent that kind of thing as well, because what I realized was that I couldn't rely on doctors and the system, let's say, to look after my health. Before, it's like if there was something wrong with you, you went to the doctor was going to sort things out for you, and the doctors couldn't sort it out for her, and they even made some mistakes. The mistakes didn't kill her, but they were pretty significant. And so I looked at that as a 28, 29-year old, and it's like, that's not how I saw doctors before. They shouldn't really do things like that. Like they told her she was all clear, and at that time, I did a course with her. Well, we went and did a course together on woodworking, and she didn't know which end of the hammer to pick up and which
Mm,
end to hit with. And she'd done carpentry before. For
yeah.
a doctor to give an all clear to somebody who has no sense of things anymore, it's like, how's that possible?
You seem to have such a different attitude. That's why now, and a lot of people who go through that kind of um, anguish and loss. That did you actually read a lot of books and materials to help you to make that transition for a better understanding?
I did read I did read books, a bit more later, actually. I do remember when I read many years later, Neil Donald Walsh's book Home with God, having read
Yeah.
all the other Conversations with God series, and
Hmm.
that was really profound for me. That helped to fill in a lot of more of the details of things that happen after people die, sort of stuff.
Right,
But
right.
at the time, in a funny kind of way, I read some books of poems mostly because I needed to read something at her funeral. You have to go and find source materials, but that's quite an amazing thing to do because you get to read things you wouldn't have otherwise have read. But more than anything, I think that I remember I was sitting in a train once and had this really powerful sense of how my sister's life had come to the end of the cycle. It was like a deep recognition coming from nowhere in particular, but it created closure for me around
Mm.
it. I didn't have that question, she was taken too early, or she was only 28, she was just married, and yet somehow I knew that next if she went into the next cycle, it would be really hard. She'd married an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So she'd married herself into a very challenging situation. And it just felt like, oh, okay, life goes in some cycles. That one was complete for her. She somehow decided not to do the next one, and that's natural. So yeah, I don't know really where it came from. I guess I reflected on things, and every now and
No,
then, like
no,
we do, we just have an insight.
yeah. What was your educational background? You mentioned that you went to Cambridge. What did you study or major in over there?
Oh, I was a bit messed up at Cambridge. I went to do classics, so Greek and Latin, but
Okay.
I'd spent 2 years studying music in Austria in the Mozarteum, which is the music conservatoire in Austria, and I'd forgotten all
Wow.
my Greek and Latin after leaving school, and I just didn't want to get into it again. So then I thought, oh well, I'll try philosophy because I liked thinking about things. I was
Yeah.
naturally a bit of a philosopher. I did philosophy for a while and I just couldn't believe it because the Cambridge tradition is very critical. So all we did was criticize great thinkers. And it's like, I don't understand. Don't understand. Why are you asking me, who's an 18, 19-year-old, to criticize these unbelievably influential great thinkers? Why don't I first learn to appreciate them?
Right.
That probably would have been more of an Oxford style than a Cambridge style, as it turns out. So I fought with my department around these things, which was a pointless thing to do. And in the end, did what no one ever does at Cambridge: is I changed subject twice. I was like, sent to the psychologist, broke all the rules, but I was fighting. I think I was fighting for something that would give me some sense of meaning and understanding of life,
Yeah.
and philosophy didn't do it. And so I moved into doing social and political sciences, which gave me I did some more psychology, got a bit of a sense of social dynamics and human development and things like that. So it was pretty interesting.
I see. Yeah. It seems like you've gone into so many different fields, but they all are providing that person that you are now, obviously.
Yes, if I look back now, I couldn't see it at the time, but there's this thread of trying to figure out life, really, how to live, how to really live fully, from coming from a place where I think that I felt like I was really very half alive for quite a lot of my life. Yeah, I was desperately looking for something that would feel like this is what life is supposed to feel like.
So after this section moved on from that, what happened after that in terms of your journey?
Well, the two major influences after my sister dying were 10 years. I'd already started, but 10 years spent interviewing children for BBC Radio. And that wasn't, diving in like a reporter saying, answer 3 questions and I'm out as fast as possible. It was spending hours and hours and hours with children, recording them speaking freely at length about things that were important to them. And that had a very profound effect on me. It taught me to listen. It
Hmm.
taught me a kind of sensitivity to the nuance of expression. It taught me that freshness. It brought me in touch with that freshness that feels alive, which is what I was looking for. It's almost like my previous lives. I got to the point where I was really kind of crusty and uh, jaded, and I don't know how to describe it. And I needed something that would bring me directly in touch with a freshness.
Right.
And that's what I experienced with the kids, and it was amazing. It was heartbreaking because I felt I couldn't share what they wanted to say to the world widely enough. I wasn't a good marketer. My programs weren't particularly popular. They were really nice. They were really nicely put together, beautiful material from the children, but not like mainstream radio stuff. So I think they were fairly sidelined. And I felt that it was like my heart had this little hole. It was trying to squeeze stuff out of it, and the children were pouring so much into me. I remember it became too painful in the end. In a way, I felt like I was letting them down, And that was really hard, because I loved them. I really loved them. And I was a teacher for a while as well. So that was very powerful, I think. And the other thing, throughout all of that, I was also training with these Chinese masters. And I found in the Chinese understanding of life a kind of peace and a sense of, oh, this is where I belong. I understand this. It felt like a language that answered lots of the things that I hadn't been able to answer through. And when I was at boarding school, we had chapel twice a day, so it was a fairly Christian environment.
Yeah.
I wasn't. My grandmother was very Christian. My parents were more, Christmas and Easter churchgoers. But I'd been very steeped in that, a lot of Bible stories and moral stories that you get at school. But that didn't, I was looking for something else. So I think bringing the Chinese stuff really helped me a lot at that stage.
Are you a Qigong master or something like that?
No, I did train at that. So when I started, I was doing Qigong for 7 years, and I did train to be a teacher. My next teacher was very different. You could call it a form of Qigong, but it was all through talking. There wasn't exercises. So what I learned is how to read energy, how to work with energy, like everything. It was like energy for breakfast and lunch and dinner, energy for our work, energy in our relationships. That was the language that I learned, and that's the language really that I speak, I think, most fluently now. So when I'm teaching, I'm working with people's energy all the time. But it's different. It's different from the exercises that most people think of as Qigong.